Hey guys, this is part 2 to 6.5, the x and y intercepts of a line PowerPoint presentation. So again, if you haven't watched part 1 yet, you want to do that first before we pick up with this video, which is part 2. Okay, so where we left off was finding, if I can get this to work, the x and y intercept of a line. Okay, so here we have negative 3x minus 7y equals negative 84. So in the last video, all right, I showed you that you could, in order to find the x-intercept, again, the x-intercept is where the line intersects the x-axis. So to find the x-intercept, one thing you can do is substitute y for 0 and then solve that way. So in this example, I would rewrite it as negative 3x minus 7 times 0 equals negative 84. Okay, and then I would solve for x this way. So this becomes negative 3x, negative 7 times 0 is 0, equals negative 84. And then I divide both sides by negative 3, and that gives me x equals 17. So my x-intercept for this one would be, I'm sorry, not 17, 28. Did I already do this example? Probably. Yeah, anyways. Okay, and then my y-intercept, again, to find my y-intercept, I would change x to 0. So negative 3 times 0 minus 7y equals negative 84. Again, I'm taking this from my original equation here. So in place of x, I'm putting 0 here. And then I'm just solving. Can you guys see that? I got this new dot camera, but I don't think I'm liking it. It's better visual, but it's harder to work. Okay, so now I have 0 minus 7y equals negative 84. So I'm left with negative 7y equals negative 84. Now you're going to solve for y. Divide both sides by negative 7, and that gives you y equals 12. So for this example, alright, let me see. Bracket of technical issues. Alright. For this example, x equals 28, and y, my y-intercept equals 12. Totally going back to the dot camera. The old dot camera. We should take a vote. This one's driving me nuts. Okay, there we go. Another way to solve for this, okay, another way to solve this problem is if I'm looking for the x-intercept, it's called the cover-up method, okay? So the first method is substituting 0 for x and then 0 for y to solve. Okay, this method is called the cover-up method. So say I'm looking for the x-intercept of this linear equation. If I'm finding the x-intercept, I'm going to cover y. I'm going to cover the term with y. So negative 7y gets covered. What am I left with? Negative 3x equals negative 84. See it? So then that's what I would write and solve for. So negative 3x equals negative 84. I divide both sides by negative 3, and that gives me 28. So that's a real quick method to use. Okay, again, if I'm looking for the x-intercept, I cover the term with y. And then what I see is what I solve for. Negative 3x equals negative 84. That's the cover method. See it? And then I divide by negative 3. So x equals 28. Okay, so that's, oh, I can't write today. Here we go. All right, again, this is called the cover method. The cover method. The first method that we talked about in the last video, or the first way I did this problem, is called the substitution method. So if you're looking for the x-intercept, you substitute for y. You substitute 0 for y. And if you're solving for the y-intercept, you substitute 0 for x. Okay? That's the substitution method. The cover method is when I just literally cover. So if I look for the x-intercept, right? Not the x, sorry. Guys, what is wrong? It's late in the day. This is what happens when I video late. Okay. Y-intercept, I'm looking for the y-intercept, so I cover x. And the reason why I cover is because any number times 0, right? For me to find the y-intercept, x has to equal 0 because it's a y-intercept. X is always 0. So no matter what number is here, negative 3 times 0 is going to give me 0. No matter what, x is going to 0 out, it's called. So therefore, I end up just eliminating it. So again, when I eliminate this, negative 3 times 0, I'm left with negative 7y equals negative 84. negative 7 times y equals negative 84. I divide both sides by negative 7. And solve that way. I get positive 12. Negative 84 divided by negative 7 gives me positive 12. So again, same answer, two different methods, both of them work, depending on which one you're more comfortable with. Okay, you can switch back and forth, whatever makes most sense to you. Let's try another one. So the next example is negative 8 times y equals 0. This one's interesting. I want you guys to think about what you've already learned in the past. If I have negative 8y equals 0, there's no x here. So this means if I'm trying to find the x-intercept, okay, I can't do that. There's no x value. All right, which means the x-intercept is none. And if the x-intercept is none, that means that this is a horizontal line. Okay, so now I'm going to solve for y. So y equals what? If I divide by negative 8 and divide by negative 8, y is just going to equal 0. Okay, so my y-intercept is 0, and that's also the name of my line. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Okay, so there's no x-intercept here. Okay, my next example is 3x plus 6y equals negative 72. And again, I'm finding the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So for this problem, I'm going to use the cover method for this one. Okay, so I want the x-intercept. So x-intercept equals. So for me to find the x-intercept, I'm going to cover y. I zero it out. So I'm left with 3x equals negative 72. 3x equals negative 72. And now I just have a one-step equation. 3 times x, so I divide by 3. Again, I'm solving for x. This becomes 1x or x equals negative 72 divided by 3 gives me negative 24. So my x-intercept is negative 24. My y-intercept, if I'm looking for my y-intercept, I'm going to cover x. So what am I left with? Positive 6y equals negative 72. So again, I want to get y by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by 6. I want y alone. So when I divide both sides by 6, I get y equals negative 12. So my two intercepts are x-intercept equals negative 24 and y-intercept equals negative 12. Okay, my next example is negative 2x plus 5y equals 10. Negative 2x plus 5y equals 10. So again, I'm trying to find the x-intercept and the y-intercept. What that means is I'm trying to find where this linear equation or line would pass through the x-axis and the y-axis on a graph. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is look for my x-intercept. Alright. So to come up with the x-intercept, I could do two methods. I can either use substitution. I can substitute y for 0 and solve, or I could use the cover method. Alright, I'm going to use the cover method. Just going to move this up a little higher. So again, x-intercept. Okay, if I cover y, I'm looking for x, so I cover y. That gives me negative 2x equals 10. So when I write negative 2x equals 10, I then solve for x. Negative 2 times x, divide by negative 2, divide by negative 2. X equals 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5. So my x-intercept is negative 5. My y-intercept, to find my y-intercept, I'm going to cover x. So now I just have positive 5y equals 10. And again, I'm just going to solve for y. 5 times y, so I divide by 5. Divide by 5. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other to keep it balanced, right? This cancels. I get 1y or y equals positive 2. So my intercepts for this equation are x-intercept equals negative 5 and y-intercept equals 2. To write this as a coordinate, if I said tell me the coordinate for this, right? because a coordinate is x, y, my coordinate for my x-intercept would be -5, 0. And my coordinate for my y-intercept would be 0, 2. Okay, so again, this would be y2, and therefore x is 0. That's why we would substitute 0 in to solve, which is our first method. Our next equation is 8x minus 2y equals 48. I'm going to use both methods to show you how to do this, okay? So again, if I'm looking for my x-intercept, the first method is to use substitution. So if I'm looking for x, I would substitute 0 for y. So when I rewrite my equation, it would look like this. Again, I'm substituting 0 in place of y. So then I would just solve. I have 8x, -2 times 0 just gives me 0, so I'm left with 8x equals 48. Divide both sides by 8, and that gives me x equals 6. So my x-intercept is 6. Again, if I want to use the second method, which is the cover-up method, you almost like skip this step here. Okay, so if I'm looking for x, I cover y, and I'm left with what? 8x equals 48. And so that's what I end up writing here. See it? 8x equals 48. You could actually solve that in your head, right? Okay, so then my y-intercept, again, if I'm using the substitution method, I want to keep y, so I make x 0. 8 times 0 minus 2y equals 48. Now I simplify. 0 minus 2y equals 48, which gives me -2y equals 48. Divide both sides by -2, and I get y equals -24, because a positive divided by a negative gives me a negative answer. Can you see that? There we go. Again, if I wanted to find out this answer by using the cover method, I want to find y, so I cover x. What's my answer? -2y equals 48. Solve for y. Divide both sides by -2, and I get y equals -24. Again, if I were to write both of these as a coordinate, x would be 6, y is 0. Here, x would be 0, and y would be -24. Okay, my last equation here is 8x minus y equals 24. So for me to find the x-intercept, all right, using the cover method, I would just cover y. So what am I left with? 8x equals 24. So if I have 8x equals 24, I divide both sides by 8, and that gives me x equals 3. So my coordinate would be x is 3 and y is automatically 0. To find my y-intercept, I would cover x. And again, I'm zeroing out x is the reason why I'm covering it. 8 times 0 is just going to give me 0. So I have -y left equals 24. -y is the same as 1y, -1y. So I'm dividing both sides by a negative, or I'm just switching my signs all the way across. When I divide by -1, all my signs switch. So I end up with positive y, which is what I want, equals -24. Okay, so my y-intercept is y equals -24, and I would write that as a coordinate. X is 0, y is -24. Okay, I hope this is helpful. The most common mistake I see people see is the following. So if I told you to find y, a lot of them would cover the negative and just say y equals 24. Don't forget that the sign before the term belongs with that term. So this is positive 8x, this is -1y, right, or -y. Another mistake I see people make is that they mix up x and y. So if they're looking for x, they cover x, and they get confused. So don't forget, if I'm looking for x, I'm covering the opposite. I'm covering y, or I'm zeroing out y. All right, I hope this video helps. Now that you've finished the 2 videos for the PowerPoint, I'm going to have you turn now to the textbook. So you're turning to textbook page 164 and 165.